The sterile hospital corridor echoed with the steady beep of monitors as I stood outside room 412, my hand hesitating on the door handle. Through the small window I could see my father lying there, tubes and wires creating a web around his unconscious form. Mom sat beside him, her perfectly manicured hands clutching his, while my brother David paced the room in his expensive suit. They hadn't noticed me yet. Dr. Elizabeth Morgan, Chief of Cardiology and newly appointed member of the hospital's board of directors. To them I was still just Lizzy, the disappointment who chose medical school over the family real estate empire. What kind of daughter abandons her family legacy? Dad had screamed 6 years ago, his face purple with rage. You'll never amount to anything in that glorified nursing job. Now his life depended on my hospital's care and the $200,000 procedure he desperately needed. Dr. Morgan? My assistant Claire appeared at my elbow, tablet in hand. The board meeting starts in 10 minutes. They're waiting for your decision on the charity care application. I nodded, thinking of the irony. My father, Thomas Wheeler, real estate tycoon and self-made millionaire, had lost everything in a spectacular market crash 3 months ago. The man who'd once bought and sold hospitals was now begging one for financial assistance. A hospital where his worthless daughter held the power to approve or deny his care. I'll be there shortly, I told Claire, straightening my white coat. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the door. David saw me first, his eyes widening in recognition before narrowing with his usual contempt. Well, if it isn't the prodigal daughter, he sneered. Finally decided family matters? Mom looked up, her mascara streaked down her cheeks. Elizabeth? What are you doing here? My job, I replied simply, picking up Dad's chart. 6 years of medical training had taught me to keep my emotions in check, even when facing the family that had cut me off completely. We already have a doctor, David snapped. A real one, not some trust fund kid playing physician. I bit back a laugh. If only he knew that I'd worked my way through medical school without a penny of family money, taking loans and night shifts while he enjoyed the fruits of Dad's empire. Dr. Stevens is an excellent physician, I agreed, reviewing the charts. But as chief of cardiology, I oversee all cardiac cases. The silence that followed was deafening. David's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, while Mom's grip on Dad's hand tightened visibly. Chief of... But that's impossible, Mom whispered. You're only 32. 33, I corrected, making notes in the chart. Youngest chief of cardiology in the hospital's history, actually. The board was quite impressed with my research on minimally invasive procedures. David's face reddened. This is ridiculous. I'm calling the hospital administrator. Feel free, I replied, signing my notes. Though as a board member I should warn you that complaints about senior staff go through quite a lengthy process. Another shocked silence. I used it to examine Dad's latest EKG readings, frowning at the irregularities. Board member. Mom's voice was barely audible. But, we heard you were just working at some hospital. David said. David says a lot of things, Mom. Like how I'd fail out of medical school within a year. How I'd come crawling back to the family business. How I'd never succeed without Dad's connections. I met my brother's eyes, remembering all the times he'd mocked my choices at family gatherings I wasn't invited to but heard about through distant relatives. Speaking of the family business, I continued, I received your charity care application. Quite a thorough explanation of Dad's financial situation. Total assets now at less than $50,000, is that correct? David's face went from red to white. That's confidential information. Not from the board member reviewing the application. I made another note in the chart. The procedure he needs costs $200,000. Standard billing would require a 50% deposit before we proceed. Mom's sob broke the tension. Please, Elizabeth, we've lost everything. The market crash, the bankruptcies. We can't afford it. The other hospitals turned us away. Because Dad burned bridges with them years ago, I finished. Bought them out, stripped their assets, turned them into luxury condos. Remember, I was there when he bragged about it. The memory was crystal clear. Dad at the head of our massive dining table celebrating another hostile takeover of a failing hospital, while I sat silently, already knowing I wanted to heal people, not profit from their misfortune. If you're here to gloat, David started, but I cut him off. I'm here because a patient needs critical cardiac care. The fact that he's also the father who told me I was worthless for wanting to save lives instead of buildings? That's irrelevant to my professional duties. I checked Dad's vitals again, remembering the last time I'd seen him conscious. It was the day I received my medical school acceptance letter, the day he'd given me an ultimatum: the family business or nothing. I'd chosen nothing. Or so they'd thought. The procedure needs to happen within 48 hours, I explained clinically. The board meets in 10 minutes to review charity care applications. I'll present my recommendation then. And what will that recommendation be? David demanded, his lawyer's instincts kicking in. I looked at our father, remembering every harsh word, every dismissal, every time he'd told me I was throwing my life away. Then I remembered my oath. First, do no harm. That depends, I said, turning to leave, on whether you believe I amount to anything now. The walk to the boardroom was long, each step echoing with memories. The Christmas gifts returned unopened. The graduation ceremony they didn't attend. The newspaper article about my groundbreaking research that Mom had sent back with wrong address written in red. Claire waited outside the boardroom, concern evident on her face. Dr. Morgan? They're ready for you. I nodded, squaring my shoulders. Through the glass walls, I could see the other board members settling in, preparing to review cases including my father's. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who'd once commanded boardrooms now depended on one for his survival. Dr. Morgan? Claire's voice was gentle. What are you going to do? I thought about the scared patients I'd treated, the lives I'd saved, the difference I'd made, everything my family had said I never would. My job, I replied, pushing open the boardroom door. I'm going to do my job. The boardroom fell silent as I took my seat, Dad's medical file heavy in my hands. Dr. Harrison, our chief of surgery, gave me a knowing look. He'd been my mentor through residency and knew exactly who Thomas Wheeler was. First case, Director Patel announced, charity care application for a Thomas Wheeler, requiring urgent cardiac intervention. Dr. Morgan, as chief of cardiology, your assessment. I opened the file, my medical training warring with childhood memories. Every page showed the stark reality of my father's condition, and his fall from grace. Patient presents with severe coronary artery disease requiring immediate bypass surgery. I began professionally. Multiple complications make him high risk, but delay would be potentially fatal. And the financial situation? Board member Thompson asked. I picked up the charity care application, recognizing David's meticulous legal handwriting. Patients' assets are virtually depleted following market crash and multiple bankruptcy filings. No insurance coverage due to recent policy lapse. Current liquid assets approximately $47,000. Isn't this the same Thomas Wheeler who converted St. Mary's Hospital into luxury condominiums last year? Dr. Harrison asked quietly. The room stirred. Everyone in healthcare administration knew my father's reputation for aggressive hospital acquisitions and conversions. Yes, I confirmed, remembering how he'd bragged about that deal at the last family dinner I'd attended. The same. And you can be objective about this case, Dr. Morgan? Director Patel's question was gentle but pointed. I met his eyes steadily. I took an oath to heal regardless of who needs healing. Just then my pager buzzed. Dad's heart rate was becoming erratic. I glanced at the monitoring app on my tablet, watching his vitals fluctuate dangerously. We need to make a decision quickly, I said. The patient's condition is deteriorating. As if on cue, Claire burst into the boardroom. Dr. Morgan, room 412 needs you immediately. I was on my feet before she finished speaking, doctor's instincts overriding everything else. Continue the review, I called over my shoulder. I'll submit my formal recommendation within the hour. The rush to Dad's room was surreal. My dress shoes clicking against tiles, nurses calling out vital signs, memories of every time he'd belittled my career choice echoing in my head. BP dropping. Arrhythmia detected. Family is hysterical. I pushed through the door to find chaos. Dad was conscious now, gasping for breath while monitors screamed warnings. Mom was crying hysterically and David was yelling at a nurse about response times. Everyone out. I commanded, my chief of cardiology voice cutting through the noise. Except essential medical personnel. You can't throw us out. David protested. We're family. No, I said, already checking Dad's pupils. Right now you're interfering with emergency medical care. Out. As security led them away, I focused entirely on my patient. Not my father who'd disowned me, not the man who'd called me worthless. Just another life that needed saving. Elizabeth. Dad's voice was weak, his eyes finding mine as I checked his vitals. Is it really you? Don't try to talk, I said professionally, adjusting his oxygen flow. We need to stabilize you before surgery. Surgery. His hand caught my wrist, surprisingly strong. Can't afford. Focus on breathing, Mr. Wheeler, I replied, deliberately using his formal name. Financial matters are being handled. His eyes widened at my professional tone, really seeing me for the first time, not as his disappointing daughter, but as the doctor holding his life in her hands. I'm sorry, he whispered, tears forming. I was wrong, so wrong. The monitors screamed again as his heart rate spiked dangerously. I immediately switched back to doctor mode, calling out orders to my team. Within minutes we had him stabilized, but it was clear, surgery couldn't wait for board approval. I stepped into the hallway where Mom and David waited anxiously. He needs surgery now, I stated flatly. No time for financial discussions or board meetings. But how can we possibly? Mom began. I cut her off, pulling out my tablet and accessing the hospital's billing system. With a few quick taps, I authorized the procedure and entered a code that would be very familiar to David. His eyes widened as he recognized it. That's your trust fund account number. Was my trust fund, I corrected. The one Dad closed when I chose medical school. I memorized it as a reminder of what I gave up to follow my dreams. I don't understand, Mom whispered. I'm using my personal funds to guarantee Dad's procedure, I explained, signing the digital authorization. As both his doctor and a board member, I'm expediting the process. But that's $200,000, David stammered. You can't possibly have that kind of money. You're just a doctor. I smiled tiredly. Chief of Cardiology, actually. Plus board memberships, research grants, and patents on 3 surgical innovations. Turns out saving lives can be quite profitable, when profit isn't your only goal. The shock on their faces would have been satisfying if I weren't so focused on Dad's deteriorating condition. I turned to the waiting surgical team. Prep or 3. I'll be assisting Dr. Harrison with the procedure. You're performing the surgery? Mom's voice was barely audible. Assisting, I corrected. Dr. Harrison is the primary surgeon. I'm just the humble cardiac specialist who developed the minimally invasive technique he'll be using. The next 12 hours were intense. I stood beside my mentor, helping to repair the damage in my father's heart, every movement precise and purposeful. The gallery above was full of medical students watching the innovative procedure, never knowing the patient was my father. When it was over, Dr. Harrison looked at me proudly. Perfectly executed, Dr. Morgan. Your technique will save countless lives. I nodded, too drained to speak, and headed to the surgical waiting room where my family waited. He's stable, I announced professionally. The surgery was successful. He'll need extensive recovery time, but the prognosis is good. Mom collapsed into tears while David stood frozen, struggling to reconcile his worthless sister with the confident surgeon before him. Elizabeth, he started, but I held up a hand. I have other patients to check on, I said. Dad will be in recovery for several hours. You can see him in the morning. As I turned to leave, Mom called out, Wait. We need to talk about everything. I faced them one last time, remembering every dismissive comment, every missed birthday, every time they told me I was throwing my life away. No, I said quietly. We really don't. Dad's medical bills are covered. His aftercare will be excellent. My staff will keep you updated on his progress. But you paid, you saved. David couldn't seem to finish a sentence. I did my job, I stated simply. The same job you all mocked me for choosing. The one that made me worthless in Dad's eyes. I did it because it's who I am, not to prove anything to any of you. I walked away, leaving them to process everything that had happened. My pager was already buzzing with another cardiac emergency. Another life needing my skills, my worthless career choice. 3 weeks later, Dad was discharged. I handled his case remotely, letting other doctors deal with the family directly. The day he left, I found a letter on my desk written in his shaky handwriting. Elizabeth, I was wrong. So terribly wrong. You didn't just amount to something. You became someone extraordinary. Someone far better than I ever was. The daughter I didn't deserve. I know I have no right to ask forgiveness. But I hope someday you let me tell you in person how proud I am of the doctor, the woman, the leader you've become. With love and deepest regret. That. I filed the letter away with his medical records, a document of a different kind of heart repair. Then I put on my white coat and headed to my next patient, doing the job I was born to do, regardless of what anyone thought I was worth. Sometimes the best revenge isn't proving others wrong. It's proving yourself right over and over again, one saved life at a time. A month later, I received notice that Dad had sold his remaining assets and created a scholarship fund for medical students who'd been disowned by their families for choosing medicine. He named it after me. I smiled, added my own matching contribution and went back to work. After all, there were more lives to save, more hearts to heal, including perhaps those broken by pride and prejudice in my own family. The hospital corridor echoed with familiar sounds. Monitors beeping, nurses calling, lives being saved. I straightened my white coat, checked my pager and moved forward. There would be time for family reconciliation later. Right now, someone else's father needed my help. And that, more than any revenge or vindication, was what made me worth everything I'd always known I could be. 1 year later, I stood in the same cardiac wing, but now it bore a new name, the Elizabeth Morgan Center for Cardiac Innovation. The irony wasn't lost on me. My father's real estate empire had crumbled, while my worthless medical career had built something lasting. The dedication ceremony was today, and for the first time in 7 years, my entire family would be present. Dad had recovered fully, though his trademark arrogance had been replaced by a quieter demeanor. The market crash and his brush with death had changed him profoundly. Dr. Morgan? Claire appeared at my side. They're ready for you in the auditorium. I nodded, straightening my blazer. The last year had brought changes for everyone. David had left corporate law to pursue healthcare administration, humbled by his experience of being on the other side of medical bills. Mom had started volunteering at the hospital, slowly building a relationship with me that wasn't based on expectations or disappointments. The auditorium was packed, medical staff, board members, and in the front row my family. Dad sat straight-backed in his suit, looking smaller somehow, more human. When our eyes met, he gave me a slight nod, respect replacing the dismissal I'd grown used to seeing. Director Patel introduced me, listing achievements that would have seemed impossible to the family that had once dismissed my dreams. Pioneering surgical techniques, research breakthroughs, lives saved. With each accomplishment mentioned, I saw Mom wipe away tears.